Welcome to the UCM Interface Bible Study dito sa 702 DZAS FEBC Radio TV, Agapay ng Sambayanan. Isa itong conversational expository Bible study program hatid sa inyo ng UCM Interface, ang Young Adults Ministry ng Union Church of Manila. We do our best to study context and let Scripture speak for itself. Ang programang ito ay isang teaching ministry ng Union Church of Manila, a church of many nations committed to making disciples who are transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ.
My name is Gutch.
And I'm Rainier.
And this is Ben.
All right. And we're going to go straight to the text. We're going to discuss Esther 1, 22 verses. Okay. Before we start, why don't we go through our reading?
Esther 1. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and Media, princes, and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material, the silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink with no restrictions, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke to the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king: Karshina, Sethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to law, what must be done to Queen Vashti? He asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then, when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in their own language, proclaiming that every man should be ruler over his own household, using his native tongue.
Okay, ang source natin dito sa historical background ng Esther is really this historian Herodotus. Kasi siya yung nag-document ng mga bagay na nangyari ng mga panahong yan. And here in the story, this was the 3rd year of the reign of King Xerxes.
Right.
Nung naging hari siya, he was only 32 years old. So at this point, he was only 35. Napakabata niya.
Magta-35 pa lang ako.
35. He
Same
was,
age as me.
yeah, can you imagine you're ruling an entire, this powerful empire at the age of 35? Okay, well, 32.
483 BC.
Okay.
Tapos, to put just the background, this is 103 years after yung exile.
Okay.
After Nebuchadnezzar had taken the Jews into captivity. So
Right.
yung start of the exile. And then 54 years after Zerubbabel led the first group, yung unang umuwi ng
Okay.
Jerusalem. And 25 years before Ezra led the second group.
So ibig sabihin, yung mga the Jews in Persia are the ones who decided to
Just stay.
in the kingdom and not go back to Israel or to Jerusalem.
And that could probably be for 2 reasons. Could be kasi they've already established a life,
Right.
yung career nila, whatever. Baka
Yeah, why would I risk everything?
And the second also about risk na the journey from Persia to Jerusalem is around 900 miles. Diba?
Okay.
And that's, wala pang walang aeroplano dyan eh.
Yeah, it was
Diba?
a very risky
Oh.
trek.
So, medyo delikado. May pagka-Mad Max yung lugar na to. Na pag 900 miles yun, baka madali sila eh.
Oh,
Mahirap
delikado yun.
Yeah, so they probably wouldn't have risked it. A lot of them just chose to stay there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and then second would be big factors. First is we don't know the author.
We really don't. Oh, ito nga yung controversial. But for our purpose, we will not try to resolve
Yeah.
who wrote the book of Esther.
Yeah.
But instead of focusing on that, tingnan natin yung mga bigger themes
Right.
in this book. For example, ito ang nakakapagtaka eh. Why was this book even included in the canon of Scripture when there was no mention of God at all?
Oh, yun yung big thing. God was not even mentioned once.
Kaya nga meron din yung nagdududa yung iba eh, na parang hindi nga yata dapat nakalagay sa Bible itong Book of Esther because God was not even mentioned
Right.
at all in the book. And the only religious reference was the fasting.
The fasting, yeah.
Yun lang.
Fasting. oo nga.
Yun lang. Pero later yon. Pero wala talagang Diyos dito. But why do you think God wasn't even mentioned?
I think that's gonna be like part
Yan
of
ang
the story.
maganda. That's something that we need to understand and discover in this book. We need to explore and understand why, despite the fact that God wasn't even mentioned in the book, it's in the Bible.
Yeah. There's a small issue lang din na parang walang historical record si Vashti.
Isang problema yan. Oh.
People don't know who Vashti is.
Walang pangalang Vashti. We don't know why the author, whoever wrote the book of Esther, mentioned Vashti. Pero yan naman ang nakakatuwa sa biblical archaeology, for example. In archaeology, they have this principle. Absence of evidence is not evidence of
absence,
absence.
yeah.
Kasi it really is a very new science, archaeology. Kaya marami pa tayong na-discover
Right,
sa ngayon.
right.
For example, itong si Pilate, akala nung iba na historians, invento lang yan sa Bible, yung si Pilate na yan. That, for example, that say Luke just came up with this character named Pontius Pilate kasi wala silang makitang records. Oh, ngayon, may nakita na.
Yeah.
So, kaya mahirap gumawa ng conclusion na this is not real.
Right,
This is
right,
just
right.
an invention. Malay mo, later on, they find other documents proving that Vashti was a real person.
Yeah, some actually say that she had a different name. Another big thing, usually when you watch yung mga Esther na movie, parang merong pagka-pristine, pure look
na
Very clean.
Demure. Kumbaga sa Pilipino, yan yung tinatawag natin, hindi makabasag pinggan.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That is our image of Esther.
Pero going through the text, parang there's a lot
Parang
of...
hindi ganun eh. Kasi halimbawa, isang napakaklaro naman na Esther was a member of
harem.
Cersei's harem. Eh ano ba ang serbisyong binibigay ng isang babae na kasama sa harem?
Hindi naman, hindi naman siguro mga sharing your feelings, yung mga ganun, diba?
Ganon, ano? Hindi ganon. Kasi pag pinatawag ka ng hari, papuntahin ka sa kwarto niya, hindi naman siguro dahil magko-crochet kayo ng hari,
diba?
magko-cross-stitch kayo. To be blunt about it, you're there to provide a sexual service.
Yeah.
So it's for the sexual pleasure of the king.
Yeah, and that's parang there's a lot of compromise in this story.
Yun na nga, isa pa yung issue
even-
dito sa Esther, ang daming compromises na ginagawa nung mga main characters like Esther and Mordecai.
Yeah, like Mordecai encouraging Esther to even marry
A
a Gentile
Gentile.
is definitely against the Jewish law.
Yeah, the Torah, di ba? That's
So-
karumal-dumal yun.
Oo, kaya,
For a Jewish woman to marry a Gentile.
right.
That's a violation of God's law.
Yeah. Okay. So that's those are the big factors, and
Yeah.
then we're gonna discuss it in chunks. First is we're gonna go through verses 1 to 8,
Yeah.
which is the party, tsaka yung parang lavish description of the palace.
Right.
And then 9 to 22, which is yung Vashti na scandal. Yung parang yung nangyari nun kay Vashti.
Yeah, tingnan muna natin yung verses 1 to 8. Kasi dito sa 1 to 8, meron ditong 180-day feast.
Right.
Wow. Ilang buwan ba yun? May ako sa mate.
6 months yan, half a
That's
year.
half a year na walang ginawa si Cersei except to
Enjoying themselves.
enjoying themselves and displaying his wealth. And the author does not explain to us why. Pero itong si Herodotus nga, na historian, did mention something about Cersei's displaying his wealth for about half a year. At meron palang dahilan yun. And he said it was aimed to show that Cersei could make good on his promise to win the war against Greece. Kailangan ng background to eh. Kasi itong tatay niya, si Darius, lumaban na yan sa mga Greeks, pero natalo.
Right.
Gustong bumawi ngayon ni Cersei.
Right.
And what he did was to attract, support. Kailangan sabihin niya sa mga tao na, look how powerful I am.
Join my war effort.
Join my war effort and I will reward you.
Right.
Siyempre, maengganyo kang sumali. Yun nga lang may problema tayo. Because we know, according to history, ano nangyari kay Cersei nung
Okay.
lumaban siya sa Greeks.
All right. So now, let me discuss that part then. This is some dates then. He had a half a year feast.
Yeah.
And it was for a campaign to fight against the Greeks.
Right.
There would be 3 battles. And the first one is yung Thermopylae in 481 BC. That would be in the movie, or graphic novel movie, 300. So si Xerxes doon, yung sa itsura niya doon.
Medyo
Yun.
weirdo.
Yeah. Pero yun yung historical battle na yun. That's the battle that they are building to. And Xerxes won that battle. I mean, you can say it's a Pyrrhic victory, but in the end, they won. The second one is in the year after, which is in a sea battle in Salamis.
Okay.
That would be in the movie 302.
Yeah.
Yan, 600, di ba? Yung battle na yon, natalo sila Xerxes doon. And then
Okay.
the last one was in Plataea. Plataea, I think.
Okay.
In the year after, that walang movie to. Pero doon, wala. Talagang routed sila. Wala, uwi si Xerxes
Right.
ng pera.
Ito yun. So, anong nangyari? Yung sinasabi mong gera na yan na natalo sila, that happened 4 years after this campaign. Grabe, nakakaawa sila. So, the irony of this lavish display of his wealth is really lost on modern readers like us. Kasi hindi natin alam yung nangyari pa lang yun. So the original readers, of course, would have known this. But for us, modern readers, nawawala na tong yung importance
Right,
nito na that this is really presenting an irony. Diba? O ngayon, eto, ilagay natin, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the first readers of this book. Anong papasok sa isip mo knowing all these facts?
Considering na parang they're showing all this wealth and the war effort, it's very interesting to see na parang, wala naman pinuntayan eh. Talo naman yun.
Walang nangyari, di ba? Parang nakakaawa.
All that for nothing.
All that for nothing.
Oh.
Nagyayabang ka, yung pala, talunan ka pa rin sa gera. In fact, itong si Xerxes depleted most of his royal treasures, his royal wealth, after this war. Now, it also reminds me of, I have another reference here, it's Psalm chapter 2. Why do the nations conspire and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and throw off their shackles, and so on and on. Anyway, ang ibig kong gustong pakita dito sa Psalm 2, these powerful people think they have all the wealth, the military technology and everything, and they think that they're all,
It'll save them.
that it will save them. Ang sinasabi dito sa Psalm kasi, that the kings and rulers of the earth really do not acknowledge Yahweh. They don't acknowledge God, and they have no allegiance to Yahweh. And therefore, any leader, any ruler who doesn't align himself with God is really his enemy. And God will cast off his lordship or his leadership. Tatanggalin niya lahat yan.
Correct.
So talagang walang permanent dito sa mundo na to. Okay, meron pang isang kapuna-puna dito sa verses 1 to 8. And this is the very lavish description of the palace.
That would be verses 6 to 8.
Yan, 6 to 8. No? Very lavish description of the palace, which is very unusual in the biblical narrative. Kasi when they're describing a place or a building na talagang napakaganda, very lavish, that's how they would describe the temple.
Yes.
Pero dito, for the first time, a palace of a Gentile was described in such a manner. Pero bakit kaya? Anong gustong, ikaw yung original reader, na binabasa mo, iisipin mo, teka, sa aming sacred writings, hindi dapat ganito parang temple lang ang dinidescribe ng sa ganitong paraan. So if you're one of the original Hebrew readers, how would this impact you?
Parang isipin mo na dapat yan yung sa amin na.
It's like a slap on the face.
Oh, it's like a slap on the
yeah.
face. Di ba, na-exile sila, di ba, and everything.
Oo.
And parang, this should be us.
Right.
Why is this yung kay Xerxes?
Oo. Parang sakit nga naman. Na dati, pag binakabasa ako ng ganito, it would refer to the temple and because we're so blessed by God. Pero ngayon, bakit parang yung kaaway pa, a Gentile, was blessed? Let me also read this passage in 1 Kings chapter 9. I'll begin with verse 5. I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Yun yung unang pangako sa kanila, and they're really holding on to that they will have a kingdom that will last forever. And meanwhile, they're in exile. But, verse 6, if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them, and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. Kaya nga masakit.
Because of exactly that.
Because they disobeyed
Yeah.
God. Grabe, everything is just so fleeting. No? Yung mga ganyang bagay. But the only thing that will really make things permanent and stable in this life is our relationship to God. Right? Okay. So ito yung mga bagay na minsan we miss because we fail to see things first. When you're studying Scripture, you have to begin to read it through the eyes of the first readers of the book. Any other thoughts that you just want to add to what we have so far covered?
I think it's also establishing the the mood of the time,
Yeah.
which is opulence and power.
Yes.
And as we'll see in the next few verses, parang machismo dominance.
Yeah.
Diba? Parang macho,
Yeah.
macho rulership thing.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the next segment.
All right. So
Okay.
we're now at 9 all the way to 22, which is basically one scene. So it starts with Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for
Right.
the women. And then, pinatawag si Queen Vashti.
Ito na yung medyo mainit na parte dun sa kwento kasi ito na yung may conflict.
All right, so let's move on to verse 9 to
22. Okay. Ano ba yung nangyayari dito ulit?
Si Vashti has a banquet for all the women.
Oo.
Tapos parang,
Oo.
girls only party.
Girls only.
And then guys only party.
Tapos yung guys, may party rin sila.
Yeah, and then si Xerxes called Queen Vashti.
Yeah.
Commanded yung eunuchs niya to bring Vashti. Pero ayaw niya.
Ayaw niya.
And then, big issue.
Ayaw pumunta ni Vashti dun sa party ni Xerxes. But we're not told why. O sige nga, ano yung mga conjectures nyo? Bakit kaya? Kasi wala naman sinabi eh. So manghuhula talaga tayo dito.
Oh, there's several reasons, I think, from what I read. It could either be because it's Persian custom not for yung women
To mingle with...
not mingle in a all-male party thing, I think.
Maybe. Okay.
Not to mention, it's really against the custom. It could be that. And then, but because Xerxes was doing it, and he was doing it because he's half drunk, so maybe he's not
Right,
thinking about that.
yeah.
And Vashti would probably be thinking, parang he'll get over it when he's sober. and then, or second daw, she could be pregnant with Artaxerxes, which is yung son. And then the third one, sabi daw, she was asked to come to be displayed with the crown and with nothing else.
Of course.
So kind of like, pinapakita lang ni Xerxes kung gaano kaganda yung misis niya.
Yes. But whatever the reason was, and we're not really...
There's no sure reason but I guess it's
so-
not as important, the reason.
Right. But the point is, she
Did not.
disobeyed the king. Eh, ano naging resulta nitong disobedience na to?
She disobeyed the king in a public space.
Right. And who were there?
All the generals, the governors, the key people in his government.
Right.
his
These are the
empire,
most
basically.
important people in the government.
Naniligawan niya for the
he's
war
trying
effort.
to get their
Yun.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Trying to get their support. But look, your own wife wouldn't support you. Ang sakit nun kay Xerxes.
Right.
Okay. Siyempre, na-insulto si Xerxes and therefore, what happened next? Interesting. Nagtanong muna siya, according to law, ano bang dapat gawin?
Tapos yung si Memucan replied, Queen Vashti has done wrong not only against the king but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces. of King
damay-damay
Xerxes."
na.
Damay-damay.
He's a very legalistic guy.
Ah.
Di ba? Ganun agad siya eh. Kasi lahat dinamay na. Di ba? Itong memuka na to, bigla na lang sumagot talaga na sinabi niya na lahat sinaktan niya. But is that really true?
Probably.
I think it's exaggerated talaga.
Medyo exaggerated. Oo. Pero tinan mo, sino ang nadamay tuloy with this decree?
I think all the people of the land.
All the married women.
All the women,
All the wives.
all the wives, therefore, would now have to...
forcibly be
To respect
submitted.
their
Yeah.
husband. All the women will respect their husband from the least to the greatest. That's verse 20.
Okay, what is weird about this decree?
I found it so weird kasi parang, how can you force somebody to respect you?
Yeah.
Respect is given freely.
Yeah.
Oo.
It's earned.
Yeah,
You
it's
have to
earned.
earn... respect is earned.
Yeah,
If
and
you,
yet, yeah.
if you force a respect from someone, that's no longer respect. That's coercion.
But we
Diba?
understand that kind of culture, being Filipinos, medyo hierarchical din yung ating kultura. And therefore, we have this kind of expectation. Minsan nga, respect sa atin pinipilit eh. Basta sinabi ng tatay mo, sundin mo, tatay mo yan. Period. But this is abuse. This is really abuse of authority. Di ba? Kita mo naman nangyari, lahat na lang ng mga misis sa buong kingdom, the entire empire, would be punished for this. And it's forced upon them. Like what you guys said, respect has to be earned. Okay, but this subservience to women reflects something about the leadership style of these men. What can you say about the way they wield their power and their influence? What can you say about that?
What I find interesting dito rin is that alpha male party
Okay.
na lahat sila lasing. Tapos parang, kailangan na.
Tama.
Parang gano'n,
ego.
papalakihan ng muscles eh. Ganun. And I think that's the type of leadership they have, that they're waving around their power.
Yeah, I think it's like, it reflects the insecurity. Yeah, kasi parang when you're insecure, you compensate and you end up overcompensating with force.
That's a very good point. Because remember, napaka-insecure na talaga nitong si Xerxes to begin with. Because he was really trying so hard to gain the confidence and the trust of his powerful people, yung may rank sa kanila. Kasi gusto nga niyang talunin na talaga yung mga
Right.
Greeks. Diba? Pero totoo yan, lumalabas yung insecurity. Kaya nga biglang the way he addressed the problem was, anong batas ang na-violate? But let's just look at Scripture. Would you read Matthew 20, 25, and 26? And then, Ben, would you please read John chapter 13, 12 to 17?
All right, so Matthew 25:26. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant."
Whoever wants to be great among you
Must
be your servant. Grabe to, this is really very radical. Okay, this is just chapter 1, and there are so many themes that we've seen so far. And one is when we started, reading the chapter, this display, 6 months displaying his wealth. It's really a story about reversal of human fortunes. That's one theme that we've seen. Or even just the vanity of worldly power. Yung bang ginawa nila na nagawa agad ng decree, dinamay kung sino-sino, the abuse of worldly power. And again, in chapter 1, wala tayong nakitang Diyos dyan. Diba? He wasn't mentioned at all.
No mention of God.
So, what does this chapter tell us about these themes? So, unahin natin yung reversal of human fortunes. Ano nakikita natin dito? What lesson can we learn from this?
From that, it's something like, no matter how much power worldly thrones have, eventually, magkakaroon ng reversal yan.
Yeah.
And there's only one throne that will last forever.
That's true. And that is why Scripture tells us not to hold on to things which moth and rust will destroy.
Yes.
Lahat yan mawawala. This world everything in this world is fleeting.
Right.
This world is passing away. It will eventually be gone. Dahil papalitan ito ng something more permanent. Oh, what about the vanity of worldly power? Kita mo naman kung paano in-exercise yung power nila, di ba? Talagang gumawa agad ng batas. Let's do this and punish everyone. Or all the women.
It's funny, no? I mean, you'd assume that a person who has so much power would be more secured of himself. And because of all that security and all that loyalty that he can now demand from his subjects, would be able to think straight,
Yeah.
think more calm.
Yeah.
Well,
But-
considering that they were drunk,
Well, that also.
But let me just explain something about drunkenness.
Okay.
Importante sa kanila yan, especially when they're making important decisions. They have to be drunk. Kasi yung alak na yan will connect them to the spirit world, which will give them guidance as they make decisions. But of course, we know that's really stupid. When you're drunk, hindi ka makakagawa ng tamang desisyon. But look,
kaya pala wines and spirits. But,
kaya wines and spirits. So, kaya sabi ni Paul kay Timothy, konti lang. Konti lang daw.
Sa akin, I think one of the interesting things is that, kasi chapter 1 is setting up the narrative to Esther and what's going to happen. And I think like most of our readers probably have read Esther. I'm thinking and know what's going to happen next. This is like setting up the story. Ito yung tsura, ito yung ginagawa ng mga men in power.
Yeah.
And you will really see that women are powerless dito.
Right.
And may decree pa, which plays a big role in, I think, what Esther's gonna do.
Right. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I think people who have so much power, kinakawawa talaga nila yung mga powerless. Lalo pa nilang kinakawawa yun. Look, the women in the Persian kingdom, kinawawa nila. I think this is really the tendency of people who have so much power in their hands. They really get corrupted.
Yeah.
And they abuse the powerless. Pero ito hindi natin nakita ang Diyos dito But is God there?
Of course.
In the story? Paano nyo masasabi yan?
We'll see in the next few chapters.
But in chapter 1 alone, was God there? Was He at work? Did you see Him working?
If you know the spoilers.
But
Yes,
even if you
would.
don't know the spoilers, but at least the historical background, knowing that this is about the reversal of the story of Xerxes, the reversal of his fortunes, I think that's where, for me, I think that's where I see the inscrutable work of God.
Yeah. As the author is setting it up, God is also setting up the scenes. Eh.
And this is an actual historical event.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And God is there, working. Hindi siya nawawala dyan. Akala natin, gumawa lang siya ng decree, nalasing siya. Akala lang natin, nagalit siya kay Vashti. And akala lang natin si Vashti just simply disobeyed Xerxes. No. It's all about God.
Build up.
Oo, working in the background.
Right.
And of course, this will be clearer
In the next few chapters.
in the next few chapters. All
And
right.
I guess that's it. Hope you guys learned something. And we'll see you on Esther 2.
Okay.
Thanks. See ya.
You have listened to the UCM Interface Bible Study here at 702 DZAS FEBC Radio TV, Agapay ng Sambayanan. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, 702 DZAS FEBC Radio TV, and Facebook account, 702 DZAS FEBC Radio. Hear our full episodes on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, at marami pang iba. Join us at Union Church of Manila, Rada, Corno Legazpi, Makati City.